All right, welcoming you to our wellness webinar this month. We are joined by a very exciting guest, Erin Price, and she is the Director of Psychosocial Support Programs at Smith Center for Healing in the Arts in Washington, D.C. I'm Ann Grace with the IWMF, and I'm so excited to welcome you here today. We've been just chatting with folks as we get settled, and they're joining us from all over the world. And that is one thing I love about working with an international organization, that we really do have this network. I want to just start by saying that most of us may already have a wellness plan that applies to our physical bodies. Whether you're in PT for a back issue or you're actually in treatment for cancer, like so many of us are, or both. But it's rare that we actually set goals for ourselves when it comes to mental health. More and more, we're learning how mental and physical health are integrated and affect one another. We're learning how they are connected. And so I'm really astounded and grateful to see this many folks here wanting to address their mental health. And in our webinar today, our guest is going to help us develop our own individual mental wellness plan to help navigate life with Waldenstroms. So just a reminder to please stay muted. Feel free to type any questions you have for Erin into the chat. And at the end, I'll funnel those questions to her. And then we'll have a period of time where we're not recording that you can ask your questions. So let me share a little bit about Erin. Erin Price, as I mentioned, works at Smith Center for Healing in the Arts, and that is a really amazing place. We've had some other guests come from Smith Center. It's a nonprofit health, education, and arts organization in Washington, D.C., whose mission is to develop and promote healing practices that explore physical, emotional, and mental resources that lead to life-affirming changes for people affected by cancer. So Erin's work began there in 2012 and currently includes, I don't even know how you do all of this, Erin, but providing group support and individual therapy to those impacted by cancer, managing a team of integrative patient navigators, thank you for that, overseeing program data collection and evaluation, taking a bow, and managing Smith Center's innovative integrative patient navigation training. And she has a special interest in what we're doing today, integrative oncology, cancer survivorship, and providing support to both young and older adults diagnosed with cancer. So let me ask Erin a couple questions and then we'll get into her presentation. I see all of these letters behind your name, Erin, and I would love for you to share, what do those credentials mean?
One that you'll see is LICSW, which just means I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. There are actually more letters I could add behind my name because I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and they all have different acronyms. I just picked DC to simplify things. And the other one is OSW-C, which means I'm a certified oncology social worker, have essentially a number of years of experience and continue to maintain that experience specifically in oncology.
That is so wonderful, and I appreciate knowing that you have a lot of training in this field. But I am also curious, on a personal note, what led you to become a social worker helping those affected by cancer?
Yeah, so this was actually a second career for me. I started off in sort of marketing and fundraising. Actually at the age of 28, got my own cancer diagnosis of breast cancer, and going through that process at such a kind of critical time where I was really not happy with what I was doing and wanted to make a change anyway. I ended up doing fundraising at Smith Center, and then just shifted more and more into programs, decided to go back to school to get my master's in social work. And then I've been so fortunate to work for a place that has supported that kind of growth and transition over the last nearly 13 years. So I've been with Smith Center for 13 years. And yeah, so I really felt, after going through my own cancer experience, compelled to help others. Primarily at first, it was kind of deal with the isolation, not feel alone, but also has evolved into really just providing that validation of cancer can make you feel like you're crazy, but you're not actually crazy, which is a nice segue to today's talk.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will let you get right into it and just know that you're with a very special group of folks here who have a rare lymphoma. And isolation is one of the things that impacts this group because, the immune system is affected. So being on Zoom in a group like this is one way we get a lot of our, community support feeling, which I'm hoping is tailored into all of your mental wellness plans.
Absolutely. I'm sure it will. I know it will come up. So, all right. I'm going to go ahead and share my slide, share my screen. Can everyone see this? All right.
Got
Okay.
it.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I've already introduced myself. I will skip that for now. But I want to invite us before we jump into the content, I want us to all just take a moment, and I'm going to invite you to just take a breath, to just arrive here. I know sometimes when I'm bouncing from thing to thing, my brain is also bouncing and never settles down. So it's going to help me, but I'm going to invite you to breathe in deeply. And then on the exhale, I want you to breathe out loudly. You can be on mute. I don't have to hear you. But just take that sort of deep sigh and breathe in whatever you need and let go of whatever you don't need. So let's do it together, if that's all right. So I invite you to breathe in and out. I'm going to invite one more time. Breathe in and out. All right. Thank you. Very simple practice, but I find that it helps me to, just let go a little bit, just a tad bit. All right. So what we'll cover today, we're going to talk very generally. I know that, each of us has our own experience with cancer, where we are in the trajectory of it, maybe completely different, but we're going to talk just kind of generally about how cancer can impact mental health. We're going to talk about what normal responses are. Everyone wants to know if they're normal. We're going to talk about the stress response, our body stress response. We're going to go through some ideas, brainstorm a little bit, some ways to cope. And then we're going to spend a decent chunk of time actually building coping plans for ourselves, to the extent that you feel up to it today. As I mentioned, or for those that came in a little bit later, I do encourage you to have something to write or type with. You are welcome to participate as fully or as not fully as you want in the writing of notes. And you can also take this with you, right? If you can only do a little bit now, you can always work on this later. So inviting you to have something to capture thoughts with. So this is this is an Institute of Medicine, right? The sort of basic cancer care trajectory across every type of cancer, which of course for everyone looks a little bit different. You start some point with diagnosis, and then you end up somewhere at this end, right? You either die from another cause, you have a second cancer, you have a recurrence, you are maybe in a period of management or waiting or survival. But this is the general trajectory. And everyone's kind of in a slightly different place. But as you can see, it's quite the maze of choose your own adventure options that you might go down. And a lot of them carry a lot of stress. There's also this concept of survivorship. And so this is a very complicated term for many of, am I a cancer survivor? Technically, you're a cancer survivor the day you get a diagnosis that says you have cancer. Not everyone identifies with that. But if you are in a period where you have either completed treatment or are on a chronic set of treatment or are just kind of living in a holding pattern, I would say that you are primed to feel like you might be standing on the edge of a cliff, right? Like you have been maybe, wrapped in a plan and wrapped in seeing providers a lot, and maybe something changes with that. Or maybe you just get to a point where you're living with and you're trying to figure out how to live with, and it just becomes this time of confusion, sort of how do I navigate this new place that I'm in? There's not often a lot of framework for it for people. And I think a lot of people just tend to then feel like instead of being in survivorship, they're in survival mode, and are just sort of coming to grips that everything that happens since their diagnosis, however long ago that is, and whatever that looked like, there's a lot that goes into all of this. Just saying, again, your relationship to this, where you are in the spectrum, this is not a full list, but just pointing out what may be obvious to very many of you, there are lots of long-term and persistent effects of cancer and or its treatments. So acknowledging that all of these things can lead to more stress and strain on your body, your mental health, your physical health, etc. So just acknowledging all of the fallout that can occur. And I hear this a lot. I've experienced it myself, just this idea of sort of waiting for that other shoe to drop. I don't know if this concept resonates with you or not, but it's a phrase that I often hear in relation to being diagnosed with cancer or living with cancer or being in a survivorship mode. Many just feel like they're living waiting for bad news. And that can be a really stressful place to sit. And it can also really make you feel like you're crazy. And you're always looking for threats, which is not fun. And it'd be hard to cope with that unknown and all of the sort of big emotions that come with that. I want to just give the permission, maybe is the right word, to acknowledge that cancer might be traumatic for some. It doesn't have to be traumatic. It certainly reignite old traumas, but a cancer diagnosis can be traumatic for some, and again, maybe not as traumatic for others. A diagnosis may bring a threat of death or treatments that are also traumatic. We think about cancer treatments that we experience, and those are also pretty jarring and altering to the body. So, some people may experience those as more traumatic than others. We are physically stressing our bodies at the same time, even though there's an intent to cure or treat. And so just acknowledging that sort of weird headspace that you're put into of, I'm treating my disease and also physically harming my body at the same time. And that's not a place that we're used to being. And it's hard to sort of sometimes sit with that. We sometimes discount the fact that treatments are so harsh because they do offer that hope, or they offer that sort of help. And they are great, right? We want them. We want this to be, but I also want to acknowledge that they're hard too. And we don't always have to think of them as amazing sunshine rays of, unicorns and rainbows. That can be hard too. Cancer does tend to be more traumatic, sometimes if you're diagnosed younger, or if you are at a very, have a lot of other stressors, or just maybe how it is diagnosed. There's a lot of things lead to it, but I just want to kind of give this permission that if you're feeling traumatized at all by any of this, it's okay. You're not doing it wrong. I put up here just sort of the definition of trauma, the mental health definition of trauma, and you can see, right? Directly experiencing a traumatic event. Maybe your friends or caregivers are witnessing you going through this, learning about it, right? So there's lots of points here where we can be triggered. It doesn't mean that we're going to maybe go into full-blown PTSD, but it gives us permission to be a little bit gentle with ourselves at the very least. If you're experiencing post-traumatic stress symptoms, again, you may not have full-blown PTSD, but you might have symptoms. Here's what it might look like. There's a fight or flight response that doesn't quite turn off, known as hypervigilance. Sorry, I don't know why these are coming out in weird order. Increased hypervigilance, you might have particular physical symptoms or body sensations that are triggered in certain settings, like maybe when you go visit the doctor. Flashbacks, nightmares, other triggers that sort of put you right back in that experience, maybe certain smells, places, memories. And then just general symptoms of anxiety, depression, or other distress generally connected with a trigger. Maybe you're going to get a test or a scan or something, and that, triggers you to feel a heightened level of anxiety. And maybe you have a hesitancy to move forward in your new routine, a fear of the unknown, not wanting to move away from a comfort zone, right? These are all potential things to just acknowledge if you're experiencing them. So what are normal emotional responses to cancer? You can all get out and check to see whether you are normal. As you can see by this list, pretty much anything is normal. So yes, whatever you're experiencing, however you are processing your diagnosis, however you are processing what you've been through, it's all correct. It's all normal. It might not all feel great. I'm not saying that it is wonderful and it feels good, but whatever your response is, and it could be and likely is many of these things, it also may likely change over time. It's all normal. There's not one right way to respond to a diagnosis or treatment. We all may respond a little bit differently. And also there may be some similarities between our responses, and that's perfectly okay. So if you're feeling like your response to cancer isn't right, I hope you can start to sort of let go of that a little bit. The bottom line is there is no right way to cope with a cancer diagnosis. Whatever you're feeling or felt or however you respond is normal. You are not crazy. And the situation that you're dealing with is crazy, right? So the situation is crazy, not you. I want to highlight a little bit that the remarkable thing about our minds is that we construct our reality. Everyone's is a little bit different. It's all based on our own perspective. And we have the power to adopt an infinite number of perspectives about a given situation. What that means is that there is an infinite number of truths about any given experience. Are there parts of your experience from which you've grown? The answer can be yes. If you could undo the entire experience, would you? That answer could also be yes. Do you feel more vulnerable since the diagnosis? Do you simultaneously feel like you can handle more than you could before cancer? It's important to allow for the coexistence of these truths. Our minds are capable of creating almost any story we choose. And this can be a blessing if we are able to tap into it. We can choose self-compassionate narratives that allow us to sort of make healthy choices for ourselves. But this can also be a burden when we are overly self-critical or are really focusing on worst-case scenarios. The bottom line is that how we think about things affects our experience to them. So putting this out there to start to help maybe give some, again, permission to maybe reevaluate your relationship to things. And not trying to say that you should put on those rose-colored glasses and that's all great. That is not what I'm saying at all. Are there more helpful ways that we can think through some things that are bothering us? And we might experience that and instead of the or. I want to encourage you to give yourself that permission to have those multiple truths, to experience being sad and grateful instead of sad or grateful. Sorry, my clicker was not working. Once you give yourself that permission, you can then choose to portray certain feelings more than others. I use the word choose carefully here with the understanding that there are many aspects of one's experience or one's appearance or what's happening to you, one situation that you have no choice over. But there are many visible signs. But to the extent that someone can make a choice, what narratives do you choose to portray? What narratives do you choose to highlight or focus on? Remember, in all that is out of your control, this is one thing that is within your control. So I really love this, the work of Wendy Lichtenthal, and has some really great things here around, how you can take some control over your narrative and thinking about how you want to lean into things. Again, not advocating for rose-colored glasses, just trying to offer this idea that we have power over how we perceive things. And to the extent that it's helpful, that might help shift our relationship to it a little. Ultimately, you can decide what this all means to you. You can decide at any time if you are allowed to feel grief, to crawl into bed and pull the covers over you, or you can decide to focus in the same moment on what matters most to you and to step into life as fully as you can. It should not necessarily be an either or. Sometimes you might feel like you want to pull the covers over your head, and sometimes you might be smelling the roses. And again, that's okay. It can change from day to day. There is no right way. I'm not suggesting that you can choose your feelings necessarily, but you can choose the meaning that you make of them. There are multiple truths in the experience and how we feel. There are multiple truths in who we are. And there are multiple truths in what cancer or a diagnosis can bring. So remembering this idea that grief and gratitude can coexist. We can give ourselves permission to experience the entirety of what we're feeling. Then when you need respite from a given angle or perspective, maybe try to nurture the alternative. You can amplify a perspective you value by sharing it, by journaling about it, by working through it, through self-talk, and just be flexible when a certain perspective isn't working for you. You are the author of your story. You are the creator of your truth, and you can be the voice of compassion for yourself. No one chooses cancer, but you can choose your truth. So I like to lay this groundwork of a sort of highlighting our agency and what power we do have. And also, sharing from a research, it's not all bad. Tedeschi and Calhoun have coined this term post-traumatic growth, which describes the positive psychological change that can or may occur as a result of a struggle with a highly challenging adverse life event. It doesn't necessarily have to happen, but often we do see growth from traumatic events. People may experience different types of growth while coping. It might include improved relations with others, maybe leaning into new life experiences, maybe a greater appreciation for their life, a sense of personal strength, maybe spiritual development. These are all potential avenues for growth, but if you haven't experienced any of these, that's okay too. Again, this is not you have to go down this route, but you could. And even if you are experiencing post-traumatic growth, you may feel stress, you might feel negative feelings. It doesn't negate all of that. Remember that growth and suffering can happen at the same time. And in fact, most people who report post-traumatic growth also report having struggles. Post-traumatic growth, like post-traumatic stress, is not something everyone experiences. Research shows that these people are more likely to experience it. So those who generally adapt well to new experiences and challenges, those who have a more positive outlook, and those who have strong social support networks. If this isn't you, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. If you choose to, you can try to foster personal growth through your experience. Some suggestions include trying to reduce your anxiety and stress. Easier said than done. We'll talk about that a little bit today. Reflecting on your experience. Trying to restore a sense of safety in whatever way you can. Maybe this is through talking with a mental health professional, or figuring out ways that you can make yourself feel safe again. Connect with others. We've talked about that already, and you already are doing that, some of that work, and reaching out and being connected to other people who are going through your experience. And create maybe a post-trauma life vision, right? Think through what you've learned, and then plan how you want to live more fully. Okay, now that we've laid that foundation, I'm going to take a quick little detour into talking about our body's stress response. So what is stress? Stress is defined as physical, mental, emotional strain or tension. It is a condition or feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demand exceeds the personal or social resources that an individual is able to mobilize. The key word here is perception. The perception that a person cannot cope with a given stressor. A key thing to note here is that because stress is based on perception, what one person considers to be stressful, someone else may not. So an example I often use here is one person may absolutely love public speaking. I'm obviously standing here before you today. I do not mind speaking in front of a group. And someone else on this call may have a panic attack at the mere idea of standing up in front of a microphone. It's the exact same situation, but two completely different responses based on the individual, based on my perception of what I can handle and what I can do. So just acknowledging that stress looks different for everyone. And yes, there are some kind of commonly perceived stressful events, but again, our relationship to each one of them may be different. So to expand on this, not all stress is bad. Our body has learned to adapt and respond to life-threatening stress for our survival, right? That tiger is chasing us. We want to have a stress response so that we can run away. That is beautiful, lovely, good stress. Our body will produce that stress response. We'll get a burst of adrenaline and our body systems will optimize so that we can run. It's important. It's an important function. It is short term. We see the stressor, our body responds, we remove the threat, and then once we find safety, our body can begin to calm back down to normal functioning. But it's important to know that our body will respond to all stressors in the same way. So, example, you may feel stress when you're driving in a car and you swerve to avoid an accident. You may also feel similarly stressed when you get an email from someone that you are dreading. One of those scenarios is potentially life-threatening. The other one, I hope, is not. But our body will physically respond in a very similar way. All stress, all threats look the same to it. So while you may want the adrenaline rush that comes with trying to avoid an accident, it may not be helpful to have that adrenaline rush when responding to emails. And then chronic stress is what we really are concerned about. It's when we have a stressor that doesn't go away. So our body starts to sort of live in the state of a stress response, which is not ideal. Essentially, our body never gets to go back to that state of equilibrium or rarely goes back to it, and regulation, and it throws all of our systems off balance. But there are things that we can do to try to help our body find balance again. And I am, as many of you may be thinking, wow, a pretty serious health diagnosis may lead me to feel like I'm living in a state of chronic stress. It is very common in among this line of work, right? A lot among individuals experience any type of cancer. So hence why we're talking about it. Let's take a quick moment to talk about the difference between stress and emotions. Emotions are an evolutionary function. We cannot get rid of them. All humans have them, whether they like them or not. And they serve a purpose. They give us useful information, right? If we're feeling sad, maybe we want connection. If we're feeling angry, maybe something was unfair. If we're feeling fear, maybe we need protection. But stress can be addressed and managed. It typically comes down to our belief, again, if we can cope with a given stressor or not. And that belief is based on our prior experiences. And that experience of stress might begin to feel automatic or visceral. And that's because it is. Our bodies learn to react quickly and strongly to stress through our past experiences, even though our stress is based on a belief. So think about this in terms of medical scan anxiety that so many experience. You are usually diagnosed after a scan or a test of some sort. Your brain then associates that scan or test with the stress of cancer or treatment. And then the next time you have to go for that scan, your brain automatically perceives that threat and you have anxiety, right? You're also going to be worried about the results, but sometimes just being in that setting just produces this visceral response, right? Your brain is always trying to protect you. It is always looking for threats. Again, whether they are emails or tigers. So how do we counteract this? We have one nervous system in our body. That same nervous system that is navigating, recovering, or, managing your health and your cancer or your recovery, managing long-term side effects, trying to get back to normal. it's also navigating the physiology of our emotions. It's all connected. So you can see, I hope, that it is pretty important for us to learn to be able to manage our stress response and find calm when we aren't actually being chased by that tiger. So I'm going to just dive into the science a touch. Just to give you a very basic overview, because I think it's helpful to understand how we can influence our nervous system. This is sort of the top-down approach. We have an arousal system. It's designed to respond to stressors very quickly. At the first sign of a problem, chemicals are released. They flood the body. However, once your body has entered into the state of arousal, it takes a much longer time to recover and return to that state of equilibrium. And again, if you're living in that state of chronic stress, it becomes even more difficult. With repeated chronic stress exposure, our brains become conditioned to stay in the stress response. There's always a threat. I always have to be on. We essentially begin to build up this tolerance to stress chemicals with repeated exposure, and our system has a harder time coming back to baseline. Essentially, your baseline changes. So maintaining that healthy cortisol level is essential to maintaining the sensitivity to that negative feedback loop. And that's also explains why when you are living in a state of chronic stress, everything looks like a threat. Everything seems terrible because your brain is always going to be, is just going to be living in that state of negativity. Nothing is safe. But if you can get back to that relaxation, you're able to see things a little more clearly. This is the bottom-up approach, that the vagus nerve is part of the parasympathetic system. It also innervates your face. It's responsible for facial gestures. Our nerve impulses travel from the body to the brain. So remember, there's the brain talks to the body talks to the brain. The yellow fibers that you see go from your belly to your brain. About 80% of the fibers go this way. It's essentially your gut response. It's the way that your body communicates to the brain, the stress response. So you can see that, right? They do talk to each other. When we talk about a mind-body connection, it's not this sort of made-up woo-woo thing. It's real, right? Our brain talks to our body talks to our brain. We know this. This is basic science. And so we have the power to influence this. Our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, attitudes can positively or negatively affect our biology and our physiology. Our body's experiences and perceptions can impact our mental and physiological state in a positive or negative way, which means we have control, right? We have control in helping to manage how stress impacts our body. And so let's talk a little bit about how we can leverage this. I like this picture of a dam and this idea of removing threats is not always possible. We are humans, as we were talking about earlier, we all get caught up in humanity, things happen. Removing threats is not always possible, but interrupting that stress response is possible. And then one more just little thing to highlight here, that are, again, on this idea that our body and brains are so interconnected. These are 4 very common symptoms that we see in various people that are impacted by different types of cancer. They're all very common. That, not everyone has them, but oftentimes people will have multiple of these symptoms. But there's overlap. These are all regulated by our nervous system. And so if we help do something to address one of these areas, it is not unlikely that it may help us in one of these other areas as well. And so by doing things to help reduce your stress, by doing things to help relax more, to improve one of these areas, you may be able to help influence the other areas as well. So how do we interrupt the stress response? I'm sure you're all wondering. One way that we'll be talking about a little bit is mindfulness-based interventions. There's a wealth of evidence behind them demonstrating how impactful they can be in improving a host of symptoms, including physiologic function, cognitive function, emotional well-being, fatigue, anxiety, depression, stress, distress. Did I name anything that you're experiencing? There's a lot of different ways to do it. So if your brain or your gut is saying to you, I've tried this before, it doesn't work, I don't like it, I'm not good at it, I'm gonna ask you to try to quiet that brain for a second and bear with me a little bit. What are mindfulness techniques that are helpful? There's a this is a list. It is not exhaustive by any means. Um, I would invite you all, if you want to throw in the chat, if you have any ideas or things that you do to help alleviate stress, feel free to share. It's a lovely way to share ideas with each other. So I invite you to do that while we're talking. We're not going to get into how to do any of these today. That's not the point of this talk, but I know that there are a lot of wellness opportunities offered through this organization and many others. So I feel confident that you have lots of opportunities to learn some of these if you don't know them already. But just know that there are a lot of tools out there. And I want to encourage you to take the time to explore what works best for you. You'll hear me say this a lot. This is, again, not a one size fits all approach. What works for one person to de-stress may not work for someone else. I will be a broken record here. You'll hear me say this again. Not everything's a good fit for everyone, and that's okay. So if you have a best friend that like is a journaling fiend and that just brings them joy and you hate journaling, that's okay. You're not broken. That's just not what works for you. So I want to encourage you to take time to kind of brainstorm, think about what are those activities or things that you gravitate towards? What are the things that you're really curious about? What do you enjoy doing when you have time to do it, or you used to enjoy doing when you were younger, right? It's what can we explore? What are some things that we can try? Again, this is a very small list. There are many, 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 many other things. And then, so this leads me into our discussion on healthy ways to reduce stress, attend to our emotions, which, as we've already discussed today, is super important to help us manage side effects, prevent future issues, develop skills to deal with future stressors, and give us space to heal and maybe grow. So we're going to go through some lists of ideas here over the next few slides. And so maybe as we're going through these, maybe you want to jot down some notes on things that stand out to you as, we'll get more, it starts big and we'll get more detailed into specifics as we go along. But, if anything's standing out of, you're brainstorming things for yourself that you might enjoy, just jot those on the side. We'll take a time to actually make a plan. This is just sort of loose brainstorming as we're going. Here's a list of some healthy coping strategies that have been helpful for others who have been diagnosed with various types of cancer. Expressing your feelings in some way, shape, or form. That could be through writing, through art, through talking, through therapy, through support groups. Just find a way to express your feelings. Doesn't matter how. Don't blame yourself for your cancer. If you possibly can shift that mindset. If any of you are experiencing that, don't try to be upbeat if you're not. You can honor and acknowledge the feelings we're feeling when we have them. Today might be a day that you want to choose to sit and cry. Today might be a day you want to choose to sit and do something joyful. You don't have to force the joy on a day that it isn't there if you don't want to. You can choose when and how to talk about your cancer, your experience, your diagnosis. It's your story. You own it. If you don't feel like talking about it, you are under no obligation to. You're in charge of your narrative, as we said earlier. Find ways to help yourself relax. We're going to keep talking about that. Be as active as you can, whether it's just even getting around and walking or stretching or doing a task, right? Be as active as you can. Look for things you enjoy. Look for what you can control. Focus on what you can control. It's so easy to focus on what we can't. And ask for help. I think sometimes this is the hardest thing for people to do, but often one of the most helpful and connecting as well, because our loved ones often want to do something, but they don't know what to do. And so opening that dialogue can be helpful. So similar to coping strategies, coping skills are methods a person uses to deal with stressful situations. Not all coping skills are good for us, quote unquote good, but things like numbing your emotions with alcohol or overeating or recreational drugs or anything that puts too much stress on your body may be more harmful than helpful. So something to consider. But in general, healthy coping skills center around things that may be a distraction, self-care, grounding, emotional release, practicing gratitude, or challenging your perception. Some individual coping tools that may include things like counseling, a group support, expressive outlets, gratitude practices, engaging in meaningful activities, getting enough sleep. That one's a really big one. Healthy eating, trying to be present as much as possible, staying connected to others, or goal setting, or other various healthy outlets or distractions, which is a big category. And you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, I'll share some ideas with you. I apologize if the text is small. Healthy outlets can look different for everyone. As I said before, this is a fairly long list of ideas to get you started. It is by no means exhaustive. And remember, when you're thinking about what you want to try or what you want to add to your kind of ideas of ways to cope, pick the things that work for you. You might want to try something that works for someone that you know that they think you've never tried before. And you're like, oh, give it a try, see if it works for me. But if it doesn't, again, you're not broken. It just doesn't work for you. You'll see there's things on here that you might look at and say, wow, that sounds really great. And there's other things that you'll look on here and be like, that would stress me out more than it would help me, right? So example I sometimes point out is cooking a meal. For some people, cooking a meal is a lovely, deeply therapeutic process. They love it. They like to nourish themselves or their loved ones. Someone else might hate cooking. And so that would stress you out. It would not be a healthy outlet idea for you. So again, pick what works for you. Another thing on here, cleaning and organizing. For some people, cleaning soothes their soul. They love it, gives them something to do. They feel accomplished. Other people hate cleaning, hate organizing. Lean into what works for you. You truly are the expert in your experience. You're the expert in yourself, and you know intuitively what things will or even could be helpful for you. And so I encourage you to try some things. If you're not sure, try some different things. If they don't work out, try something else. This is your permission and prescription to play a little bit. And then, of course, just to add this note that sometimes it's easier to cope on your own, and sometimes you need some extra help. And if you are experiencing severe distressing symptoms that last more than 2 weeks that you don't feel like you can handle, please don't wait. You can talk to someone. Generally, it could be your primary care doctor or a therapist, or a counselor or a spiritual advisor. They can all guide you towards managing your symptoms, helping you to get to a place where you feel better, able to manage things day to day. And of course, if you're having thoughts of suicide or self-harm, or you don't know where to turn, know that there are free, confidential resources available. Okay. That was a lot. Now I'm going to give you all an opportunity to breathe and reflect a little bit. And I'm going to walk you through some steps in building your own coping plan. This is when I would encourage you to pull out pen and paper or get your notes app up or whatever you're going to use. And over the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through some prompts and exercises to think through what you need to do to develop a coping plan to deal with stressful situations that you may encounter in the future. So I'll give you a moment to gather yourselves and your materials. And I'll give the prompts, and then we'll spend a couple minutes in just quiet time writing on each one. And if you need more time on them, if you don't quite get to the end of what you think you're doing, or you want to put on there, or you don't know what to say at all and you need more time to reflect, that's okay. Oftentimes people maybe have not thought about some of this. And so being put on the spot to just write down your answers right now may not be helpful. So if you don't know what to write now, I'd encourage you to reflect, think through, brainstorm a little bit, and you can always come back to this at any point. It can change too over time. So let's start first with thinking about how we can spot mental health risks. We'll begin to think about our stressors. Again, a stressor is anything that causes you distress. It can be activities, they can be thoughts, they can be people, they can be places, they can be things. But once you know what some of your common stressors are, They can be sometimes avoided or generally managed. But in order to avoid or manage stressors, you may need to make some changes to your habits, your lifestyle, your relationships. So let's just take a minute. I'm going to ask you to list roughly 4 stressors you encounter regularly or are prevalent in your life right now. Can be big, can be small, whatever's coming up for you. So let's spend a minute doing that. All right, I'm going to invite you to wrap up whatever you're writing. Again, you can always come back to this. Okay, now let's talk about our warning signs that we might individually encounter. Warning signs are symptoms like thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that indicate your mental wellness might be at risk. So this might include sleeping more or sleeping less, having more disturbed sleeping patterns, nightmares, socially isolating yourself, feeling more stress. Or it might be in the moment body sensations like your heart racing, your stomach's in knots, your chest is tight. We all feel some of these emotions in different ways. You might have emotional reactions like feeling angry, anxious, having more outbursts, or having up and down feelings. Maybe you're more annoyed or avoidant. It's important to know your warning signs because it can allow you to begin to manage symptoms before they become too intense. But I want to say you may not have given a lot of thought previously to what your warning signs are. That's okay. Not all of us have. Many of us haven't, especially if we grew up as people with the message that, no, you just need to put those emotions away. Just put on a happy face, right? Put it down. It'll be okay, right? Shove that aside. So sometimes we get really good at ignoring the warning signs because we were told to ignore them. But they are information, right? They're information that can help us cope. So if you can, spend a moment brainstorming and writing down some warning signs that you may have noticed in the past and can reflect back on. Again, it's okay if you can't figure them all out now. This is now something that you know to be aware of, and you can pay attention to it as you start to move forward and maybe start to track some things as you go through future stressful situations. It isn't always something that people are aware of, and it can take some intention to notice how our body and brain respond to stressful situations. So again, if you have some ideas, put them down. And if you don't, maybe just be curious. And I invite you to reflect on this and notice as future stressful things happen. So let's spend a couple minutes here. See if you can list 4 warning signs that you might experience. All right, I invite you to wrap up whatever thought you're having right now. We'll move on in 20 seconds or so. All right, so let's move to the flip side. Let's take some time to think about how we can maintain our mental wellness. And we'll begin by looking at self-care. Self-care has a lot of buzz around it the last few years, and I think there's a lot of ideas and perceptions and misperceptions. And so let's talk about it a little bit. These can include activities that are things that you do regularly to maintain your mental health. Things like eating well, exercising, socializing, engaging in hobbies, praying, meditating. Healthy lifestyle will make you more resilient to stress It's often helpful to choose self-care activities that can become habits and a regular part of your day or your week. They don't have to be these gigantic, I'm going to go on an 8-hour hike in the woods. I'm going to get a massage every week. I'm going to have a candlelit bubble bath, right? Some of those are sustainable, some of those are not. It's really taking care of yourself, right? Self-care. We've gotten this idea that it has to be this grand thing, but sometimes self-care is taking 5 minutes to sit in a quiet room and drink your coffee by yourself. Sometimes self-care is spending 15 minutes reading a book before you go to bed. It's whatever brings you joy. It's sometimes self-care is gardening, right? It's going on a walk, or it's drinking enough water for the day. So let's spend a couple minutes listing some self-care activities that you could or already do practice regularly. So I'm going to challenge you to think of 3. And again, try to think of things that are sustainable, doable, really that you can incorporate easily into your life if you're not already. If you're someone that can get a weekly massage and that is sustainable to you, then I want to be your friend. All right. I invite you to wrap up what you're writing. And then we're going to think through one more area here before we move into making a plan. All right, so in the same vein, let's think about our coping strategies, and this is going to help inform kind of the next step that we do. Again, coping strategies are skills that help you manage problems or symptoms when they arise. Things like relaxation techniques, communication with family and friends, maybe anger management skills, positive self-talk, allowing yourself to express an emotion, being active. Practicing your coping strategies regularly when you're not in stress allows you to be better prepared to use them when you are in an emergency. So if meditation and deep breathing is something that you are going to list as a coping strategy, it's important to make sure you spend time practicing those regularly as a self-care method so that you can more easily access that skill when you're in stress and your brain's all fuzzy from being in stress response. It'll come more naturally and it'll be more effective if you have built that skill up already. So here's a twofer. What are 3 coping strategies that you could use or try? And what are 3 places or people that you can turn to for support? I'll give you a couple minutes to think of that. And again, if you're not sure right now, just start and you can always add to this later. All right, I'm going to invite you to wrap up whatever you're writing. And then I've got 2 more exercises for you to think through. Okay, so I'm going to introduce something called a coping plan. So now that we've thought through our triggers and how we care for ourselves, let's start to turn that into a plan for when we encounter a stressful situation. So here's an example of a coping plan where you can use what you've already reflected on and then insert anything new that comes to mind to map out what coping skills and tools you have or that you know that you enjoy. Again, this is a personalized plan to you. So some of the things that are on here might resonate with you and are good ideas that you might want to consider, and others may not be for you. So if in this case, for this person, the things that they think will be helpful for them that they can do when they face a stressful situation: journal, practice relaxation exercise, play music or exercise, things that they want to focus on, happy memories, what they're grateful for, nature, planning a fun outing, people that they could contact that they think would be helpful, their friend, their counselor, a family member, their spiritual leader, and then healthy distractions they could engage in: taking a walk, watching a movie, playing a game, or cooking a meal. So this is an example. I'm going to invite you to, you can either draw some version of this on your paper, or you can just make 4 simple lists: things to do, things to focus on, people to contact, healthy distractions. You can come up with 4 for each grade. If you only have a couple for each, that's okay. This is a start. Again, the plan does not have to be complete today. So I'll invite you to spend a couple minutes thinking about what your coping plan could look like. Again, I want to stress, make sure it's stuff that works for you. I will put the example back up so that in case that's helpful to anyone. But let's just spend a couple minutes on this. All right, maybe about 30 more seconds to just wrap up whatever you're writing on. And then again, you can always come back. Mhm. All right, I have one more exercise for you to think through. So let's go a little bit deeper with this. You can also use your coping skills to cope ahead with a particular situation that you know is coming. Coping ahead is essentially a way to mentally prepare for something that you know is going to be stressful. You can do this through thinking through how you might respond to the situation and then preparing yourself in advance rather than letting the situation control you without a plan. So here's an example of a coping card. So a classic situation, I have to go in for a scan or a medical test. I'm nervous about the results. Then you come up with a helpful thought to think in the situation. In this case, they're thinking, I trust my medical team. I have faith that I can handle the results. I want to underscore that this helpful thought needs to be believable to you. It should not necessarily be a Pollyanna, like, everything will be fine, I'll figure it out, right? It should be a grounded, rooted, helpful to you thought. Sometimes that's a little challenging, so you may have to spend a little more time on it. But again, what is a helpful thought that you can remind yourself in this situation? And then list 3 coping skills or tools that you can do to help you in the situation. So here's an example: taking 3 slow belly breaths, reading a book as a healthy distraction, calling their friend from their support group. So here's a blank version. Again, you can just recreate this on your page. I'll put the example back up. I'm going to ask you to think of a specific situation that you encounter or you know are going to be encountering soon. It could be something that happens often, something that you know is coming up and tends to cause you stress. You don't have to pick the perfect situation. You don't have to pick the most stressful situation right now. This is just for practice. You can use this for infinite stressful situations. Unfortunately, I know that we're all going to encounter many stressful situations in our lives. So just pick something. And then once you identify that situation, write down one helpful but believable thought. that you can tell yourself it when you encounter the situation or when you're thinking about it, and then write down three simple things you can do to cope in the moment. For particularly stressful situations, you can even make one of these cards in advance and carry it with you or keep it on your phone as sort of a reminder of what might be helpful. Again, when we are in that state of stress, our brains sort of go offline a bit, and we are so focused on the stressor that we don't often use our rational brain. It's the rational brain is not our default. So having reminders and thinking ahead can be really helpful. Or you can use it as the notes apps of your phone. So I will put that example back up. Let's spend a couple minutes just thinking through some sort of situation. All right, let me invite you to wrap up, whoops, wherever you are in your plan. And again, you can do this for any situation. You can revise them, you can do them as informal or as formal as you want. And in the handout that will be shared, there's a template for all six of the things that we walked through, and you're welcome to print it out. There's actually multiple of these little coping card templates. So if you wanted to truly like cut them out, print them out, put them in your wallet, you could do that. Or again, do that in whatever way makes sense for you. All right. I hope that you have had a chance to reflect on what are some things that are helpful for you, how you best cope in stressful situations. What are some ways that you can care for yourself? I hope that you've had an opportunity to reflect a little bit about your own mental wellness and what would be helpful, and that you're walking away with some ideas on how to cope in the future and how to take care of yourself moving forward. And also, most importantly, I hope that you all walk away with a sense that you are not crazy if you thought that you were before, and that you were just living through a crazy situation. That's my presentation. So does anyone have any questions or anything they want to share or ask?
Thank you so much, Erin. And please, just a reminder, we are still recording this. So if your question is not something that you would like to have present on a YouTube recording that will be available to other people outside of our community, feel free to hold on to that question until we stop recording. If you would like, you can type into the chat a question that I can ask for Erin on your behalf, or you can just raise your hand and unmute and ask away on camera, in quotes. I thought that was so great, Erin. Thank you so much for helping us think about these things. I was really, really happy to go through this exercise myself, and the coping plan. I hope that folks will think of the IWMF wellness offerings. When you're making a coping plan, you need something to do, you need somebody to contact, you need something to focus on, you need a distraction. I mean, I really hope that the things that we have available for you provide you with the opportunity to, help yourself on these many levels, if it's for you. Just as Erin said, if it's not for you and you find other ways, you want to go chew some bubble gum and walk outside in nature, that's, to each his and her own. So let me open that up to anybody here who wants to share. So curious how that went for you guys. So feel free to just raise your hand and share, or ask a question on the chat. And if not, I'll just turn the recording off. Oh, Carol, you're okay with being on the recording?
Yeah, it's fine. I just would like to thank you so much for this presentation, and it follows up one that I participated in this last week with the lymphoma research group. And what my key takeaway was, it helped me normalize these reactions that I've had over the last 7 or 8 years. And putting things into a normal, I think I loved your comment, you're not crazy. So I'm normal if I'm having these stressors or these feelings of anxiety, and that my ways to choose a distraction are not always super healthy, but they sometimes really help me sort of get through it until I can have a more healthy response. Thank you. It was really excellent. And I'm sorry, I've got to take off, but I did want to share. I'm so grateful for being not crazy and having put this into sort of a normal context. Thank you again. Thank you, Anne, for bringing Ms. Price on today. It was just excellent. Thank you. Mwah. And hi to all my buddies out there too. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. Yes, I learned a new term, that post-traumatic growth sounded really interesting to me. But I see that we had a question coming in the chat from Connie. Can a person control a vasovagal response? So that's more like when you're feeling faint, if you stand up quickly, that kind of thing. Do you want to ask something more specific of Erin? This might be more of a medical question.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to be able to give you a good response on that. I think there's probably some elements that you can, but I'm not the right person to tell you, and I don't want to tell you something wrong.
That would be my answer to Erin in terms of vasovagal response. But, you know, the talk about the vagus nerve was really great. I'm so glad you included that. And, you know, sometimes we feel like we have to, I guess, justify this mind-body connection, but there it is. There is this, huge network of nerves traveling from the gut to the brain. They talk to each other. So I felt that was very validating for a lot of the things we're trying to do. So,
I think, the vasovagal response, again, I can't speak to the medical aspects of it, but, I would imagine that tending to our stress and not being in a heightened state, I think often it kind of comes on when we are in a sense of overwhelm. And so, practicing relaxation strategies ahead of time when situations where we know it might occur could help and likely won't hurt. Is that the answer? I cannot tell you 100% for sure, but I imagine that it could be helpful.
For sure. Anything that tones the vagal nerve, like deep breathing.
Yeah.
So anybody else have questions? I see Allison. You're okay with being on the recording, Allison?
I am. I'd just like to mention that the caregivers very often go through these same things. And a lot of things that have been mentioned that help and so forth and so on could be for the caregivers too.
Excellent point. Absolutely. These are tips and strategies for humans going through any situation. We have put it in the context of someone receiving a diagnosis, yet they can be applied absolutely and widely to every human being out there. And so sometimes it is helpful for us to remind our caregivers as well that you need to take care of yourself. We both need to be caring for ourselves. So I thank you so much for bringing that point up, because absolutely, we all need to be practicing this, especially when we're facing stress.
Or care partners.
Yeah.
Jody, I saw your hand go up.
Yes. Hi, Erin. Thank you for your presentation. It took me back to the day of diagnosis. Not that I really wanted to be there, but but I realized when that happened, the first reaction was, I'm dying, which is true. But also that somehow I was supposed to be stoic about it. And that almost meant not getting any help, because that would be a sign of weakness. And so as I watched today and listened and realized that every time I have reached out for help, whether it be a chair yoga class or a support group, whatever it has been, that has been a sign of strength, and it has brought me to where I am today. And I just read all of those. I wanted to gather them all and say, thank you, thank you, thank you to all the providers who have pushed, and the friends that I have met who have supported me in that, and that stoicism is not the answer. It's the anti-answer, and so thank you for sharing because what you shared today is evidence-based. I mean, and that's important that we look at that and be proud of what we've done and what there is to do. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, everything on here is not made up. It is all backed by science and research, lots of science and research. And this idea of sort of vulnerability and strength. And I think I really love that you bring that up. And we live in a culture and society where there's, or depending on where you live, but many of us are, sort of raised in this idea of we have to be independent, we have to be strong, we have to stand on our own, we have to be self-sufficient, which is great. But also we have community and we have villages and we have people that, we cannot do it all alone. And so many of us have been raised with this notion that vulnerability is weakness. Yet I firmly believe, and I think many are coming around to this notion that vulnerability and asking for help is actually a sign of strength, right? It's a sign of saying, I can't do this by myself. Let's do it together. And so I really am grateful you brought up that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. And we had a question coming in on the chat about the difference, perhaps, between having a long-term incurable cancer like the one that we're focusing on today, Waldenstrom's, versus other cancers. Are the stress response and coping plans essentially the same? Great question, Judith.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think stress is stress. As I said, your brain does not distinguish. Your body's response is the same. And I think when you're living with something that causes this constant state of living in limbo, these tools apply tenfold, right? They are how do you care for yourself when you're sort of living with just the milieu of all of the stuff. And you may need to be a little more proactive in engaging in these care things because you probably are living in that state of chronic stress, or you may have a more tendency to live in that state of chronic stress because the stressor is chronic. But that doesn't mean we always have to be on high alert. And so that's where we can introduce this idea of the relaxation response. We can talk back to our brain and say, yes, I know this is upsetting. I know this is stressful. Yet in this moment, I'm okay. And I can be okay in this moment. And so it's allowing ourselves to have that two-way dialogue with our brain as it's getting worked up, as it's seeing that threat, and acknowledging that it's there. We don't have to pretend it's not. It absolutely is. But do we have to be in a heightened stress response in this moment? Is that warranted? Is it helpful? If not, I would argue it's probably not needed most of the time. What can we do to help ourselves get into that relaxation response so that our immune system works better, our digestion works better, so that our body is functioning at normal levels and we're not just tense and all the time?
Great answer. Thank you so much. And just saying internally to myself, this is not a tiger. I liked that you brought up the tiger reference. And I see some words on the chat here coming through from Betty. She's thanking us because it's timely. She's traveling to her annual scan testing next week, having a lot of these feelings. We'll be utilizing these suggestions. And I liked the term you brought up today, Erin, scanxiety, which is so real for so many of us. And I'm glad to hear, Betty, that you'll have some new tools in your toolkit. Connie had written in another question as well. how to cope with active monitoring when I need to do healthy distractions. So active monitoring meaning that you are not going to be treating, but there'll be a point at which you might have to treat. So you're continuing, there is this sort of low level, I don't know all the time. I don't know if you want to come off mute and share what more you mean by that, or if Erin might have an answer for that right away.
Well, I can just say that I know I have to listen to my body all the time and tell the doctor what changes I have noticed the last 3 months, and then it's difficult to put it aside, not to think about it, not to monitor myself, and do these healthy distractions, because every time something pops up, I think, oh, is it a sign? Is it a symptom or not? So how to cope with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Did I say that any of this was going to be easy? Because I don't know whether I maybe said that. It's definitely not always easy. But if you got that impression, I want to walk that back. I think that, for me, this is, again, this idea of waiting for the shoe to drop, right? And that negativity bias we have. It is so easy for our brain to go down the negative spiral of, okay, what if this happens, and then that's going to happen, and then this bad thing's going to happen, and then this. Yet, could we also take our brain down the positive spiral? What if it doesn't happen this time? What if I get another 3 years, right? And our brain does not do that. Yet we can choose to try and cultivate that a little bit, give it as much attention but to me, this is kind of this idea, the tiger is there looming in the leaves. You don't know when it's going to pop out. You hear some rustling. So you're like, okay, is this it? Is this it? And then it's not it. But I would say the process is still the same, right? We're going to be continually facing stressors. We're going to be continually having triggers. We're going to continually have things that are going to put us on high alert. And so the importance of having, knowing what your triggers are, knowing what your warning signs are, knowing what could be helpful, is that you now are more aware that it's happening, and you can talk back to it and intervene before it gets to way down the road. The awareness is key. And so many of us are just not aware of either how to help or that it's even going on until it's already a crisis and we're just in a full-blown panic mode. Yet the more we're aware of what's happening in our bodies, the more we are aware of those warning signs, we can say, okay, I can notice, oh, I'm starting to get really stressed out by this. What can I do to help myself calm down before I get to a level 10 anxiety? If I can intervene at level 5, wouldn't that be far more helpful to me than I'm already having the panic attack? So some of this is building that awareness and the resilience, and it will get easier over time. The more you do it, doesn't mean that it's always going to be, okay, I'm just going to turn this on and it's going to go. Sometimes stressors are far more challenging than others, but it's really just having this sense of practice of, I know what to do. I know how to help. Sometimes some things will work, sometimes they won't, but having this sense of control of, I can talk back to this. I can say, hey, brain, I see you. I know you're stressed. Let me try to help you calm down. Because right now, in this moment, we're okay.
Thank you so much, Erin. I really appreciated that question, Connie. It sounds like Connie has really developed a wonderful awareness that's almost bordering on hypervigilance, right? To try to monitor her symptoms for her doctors. And she has that power of the mind and can use that power of the mind in other ways as well. And I wonder, Erin, what you would think about maybe a mindfulness practice for this particular, because she's already developing this amazing observer kind of standpoint.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, we didn't talk about it today in depth, but mindfulness and meditation, there's a lot of evidence behind it, but that means a lot of different things. And so sometimes I think what a lot of people have in their brain is, oh, I have to sit and I have to go meditate for 20 minutes and I have to clear my brain and not think of anything. And I can't do that. That's really hard. I'm bad at it, so I'm just not going to do it. That's a very impossible standard to set. It's impossible to clear your brain. Nobody can clear their brain. The practice of meditation is noticing the distractions when they come up and then refocusing back to the breath and trying to let go of it. That is the practice of meditating. Sometimes some people really love that. It works for them. Other people, that idea of sitting and just focusing, that's not good. Some people need to be more active. So there are more active ways that we can be mindful too. We can do, there's countless meditation apps or YouTube videos or classes that people offer where someone's guiding you through it. Sometimes that can be helpful. There's activities where you're focusing on a specific type of breathing. There's activities where you're focusing on tensing and relaxing muscles in your body, or you're doing a guided image, or a body scan. There are active meditation mindfulness styles where you're doing a walking meditation or a meditation in nature, or you are being mindful while you're washing your hands or brushing your teeth or washing your hair. These are all mindfulness practices. I love some of these. I hate some of them. They don't all resonate with me. And so if you've tried meditation or mindfulness practices before, and you feel like you are failed them or are bad at them, I would challenge that and encourage you to try a different one, or to see what your expectations of it were and what your expectations of yourself were when you went into it. Because I think we set the bar really high and it doesn't need to be that high. Even just being aware of what emotion you're feeling or what body sensations you're feeling in relation to an emotion is a form of mindfulness.
Thank you so much, Erin. We have time for one more question or comment, and then we'll let Erin get going. Allison.
I find that some things I used to poo-poo when I was younger, I do now. I mean, and they help. So if you have thought, "Ooh, I can't do that," or when you were younger, try it again. It may prove helpful for you now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we change over time. There are lots of things that I loved and could do when I was younger that I can't do now. So it goes in reverse, right? Too. We change, and our relationships to things change, and our ability to do things, our interests in things change. And so I love this idea. Mindfulness is really just curiosity. It's non-judgmental awareness, curiosity. So being curious about what is happening or what we're interested in or trying something new can be super helpful.
Thank you so much, Allison. This has been fantastic. We've got a lot to think about. And I appreciate the resources that you gave us, which I'll send out in a follow-up email. And I hope that, when we first started talking, Erin, at the beginning of today's webinar, I asked her how she was doing. She's like, and we were sharing that it's the authenticity of being vulnerable is a real thing. And so I hope that your day, you've brightened our day. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your time, Erin.
Yeah, I thank you so much for allowing me to be here and being so engaged. And I appreciate spending this time with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.